I'm going to go over on how to replace the oil filter housing gasket and the oil cooler gasket on a N52 engine. Specifically, this is on an X3, but it applies for any N52 engine. The main gasket is, the part number is 11-42-7-537-293, and if you do have the oil cooler, the part number is going to be 11-42-7-525-335. This is one of the most common leaks on this particular engine, and oil usually will run all along the front of the engine and can even cause the belts to deteriorate and the hoses start to swell from the oil contamination. The first step in accessing these components is going to be to remove this air snorkel. This part right here actually is just clipped in and pops off just by wiggling it out. This is held on by some torxes, some T30s, so you do need to remove these. Might need a ratchet for that one, it doesn't want to come free. It's a total of 4. Just need to get that one. Okay, this lifts off. Next step is remove this back part, which is going to give us a little bit more access. You also have 4 more T30s that you can access once that front piece is removed. Just take note that these are some different threads. This is a coarse thread, when the other ones are a fine thread. Now this back piece just slides out towards the back, and easy as that. Put that aside. I'm going to be putting together more than one video using some of the same footage. So for clarity for the oil filter housing, gasket, and also this is also going to be part of removal for doing removal of a valve cover for an eccentric shaft sensor and a complete valve cover replacement. You need to take this cross member off up here. So I'm going to go ahead with that and show you how to do that. There's these 2 plastic rivets. I like to just use some side cutters and slide the holder, that rivet part out. This is the other side. You just catch it and use that. Pry that out. I have an extra end. And that's going to free up the harness. So that you can just lift this up and take this cross member off, which you have 2 13 millimeters on each side. So if you loosen it up, you do have the battery terminal jump location over here, so if you loosen them up, and then you can take them out with your fingers on this side. Because your space is limited, you can take this off if you have to. Just go ahead and take these off, and then do the same thing on the other side. 2 for that side. Once they're loose, they come out pretty easy. This is to get that vanity cover off. Take that bar out of the way. Next I'm going to remove the vanity cover bolts. It's a 5mm Allen. And you should have 4 of these hold downs, 2 in the front, and you have 1 right back here up top. And 1 back here. So you can see that a little better. There's 1 over here in this little shadow, and then there's 1 right here in this corner here. And that's going to allow you to go ahead and lift up this cover and slide it right off. Now that's a crucial step for doing the valve cover replacement or any kind of work for replacing spark plugs, etc. It also helps to open up this area here so we can see a little bit better. We do have to disconnect this sensor for the oil filter housing when you're replacing the oil filter housing gasket. The way you remove this sensor, it just has a little spring retainer. Just push that in and wiggle that off and put that aside. We need to get to, there's a torx down here, and there's another one over here, as well as this one up top here. And if you do have the version with the oil cooler, there's another gasket, so you have a couple more torxes here on each side. So to do this, I'm actually going to leave the cooling system intact. I'm going to leave these hoses on, and I'm just going to move things out of the way. That saves some time in doing this repair. I'm going to remove the torx bolts on the reservoir for the power steering. There's 2 of them, 1 here and 1 here, and that's going to allow me just to move that aside. That's a E45. And that frees that up so I can actually push this aside just for a little more clarity. Make sure to open up the coolant reservoir cap to release any pressure that might be built up. And I like to put some pig mats and rags down to prevent any contamination of the belts. First, I'm going to separate the oil cooler, which is this unit right here, right in front of the oil filter housing, if your vehicle is equipped with this. Not all vehicles are equipped with this oil cooler, so you just have to worry about the oil filter housing, which is behind this. There's 2 E12 bolts here that you need to take off. You can see it's like an inverted torx. And there's a gasket behind here that needs to be replaced. I'm going to take both of these out. And you have another one on the very bottom down here. So you can see the location on that. There's one more right under here. And that's going to separate. You are going to lose a little bit of oil and a little bit of coolant at that point. That's why I like to put things down in here so nothing gets onto the belts. You can see right there, here's your cooler. You have some oil passages here and you have a coolant passage. So we have to wipe this down. This is the shape of that gasket right here. The gasket is actually fitted onto this oil filter housing right here, and this we can actually lift up and move out of the way, so we have better access in the front as well. Now the trick in doing this to save some time is to not take all of these hoses off. You can see I have, this is what's called a pig mat, and I'm trapping any kind of fluid that's actually leaking out, and it's going to collect into this pig mat. And then over here I have more pig mats down here. Now you are going to lose a little bit of coolant, so we will do a fill procedure after. So here's our gasket. This is the gasket that we're going to need to replace. Quite often this is where you're going to see the leak, as it starts spraying out right here, but it also leaks on another gasket down the bottom here, where it actually attaches to the side of the cylinder head right here. So you can have a leak here, or if you have the cooler, you can have a leak here. Now if you don't have a cooler, this is going to be enclosed right here, and it's going to look more like this right here, where you have access to this bolt, this one here, and then the hidden one is the one that's down here. That's a little bit more difficult to get to. This is that new gasket. You can see how it's going to fit right in a cavity. And you do need to remove that old one right there. So using a pick, you just go in here and you're going to work your way around and catch it. Once you catch it and you start it, hopefully you can see this. You can catch it, and then once you get it out enough, you can usually just peel it right out. There it comes. So once you catch it, you can go ahead and carefully peel it right off. And here's the old gasket. Usually it gets brittle. I think temperature changes is a big contributing factor to this oil leak that's been occurring on this particular engine. Once the seal is brittle and through the expansion and contraction from the heat and it being so cold, typically you can have oil start spraying out right here. You might even see it up underneath the hood on the insulation. I'm moving on to removing the rest of the oil filter housing before we replace this gasket in the front. Now if you don't have that, you're going to be just going right to this step. I'm going to be using an E10 ratcheting wrench to get to this E-torx right here on the bottom of the oil filter housing. Check and make sure that you're going reverse. Slide it on, and then you're going to go ahead and remove this E-torx from down here on the bottom using this ratchet wrench. Now I've backed it out to a certain point because this won't fit with this extra hose right in the way. If you do get into a bind where you've backed it out too far, you can actually loosen this up, these two 10 millimeters, and pull this hose off. This is a coolant hose, so you'll just have to add a little bit extra coolant, no big deal. I think, now this one here is pretty tight. If I loosen up my other three, I might be able to finagle that out without opening up the cooling circuit anymore. So up top here is also an E10. I have a swivel E10, which you're going to need to get to the one that's underneath the intake manifold without having to take the intake off. I'm going to go ahead and loosen this one up. Now the one under here is a longer bolt. I think all three might be different sizes. Let's see this one right here. Once you get to a certain point, you can kind of finagle it by hand. I'll go ahead and just take that one out since it's nice and loose. Now, usually when you're doing a repair like this, when you're done, it's a good idea to degrease the engine. That's that bolt right there, which is something I'm going to do when I'm all done. Oil filter housing and the valve cover. Now you have one more E-torx that's hard to get to, that's under here. I'm going to use this setup, so I have a wobble E10 and a 1/4 inch ratchet with some extensions. I'm going to actually go through here, and I can put my hand right behind the intake manifold to guide it to the location on that E-torx. You want to make sure you're good and solid on that E-torx back there. Let's get a better look at that. Here's that hidden E-torx bolt right under here. So it's right on the top side of the oil filter housing. I'm going to use this setup. I can put my hand right in here so I can actually get to that E-torx and I can start guiding it out. Now as I come out, I can pull this back a bit. That's going to give me a little bit more room to finagle this one out as well as this lifts up. And I think I have to do that as well to remove this one over here. Go ahead and guide it there. You can see the oil filter housing is already starting to move. Carefully slide this out. So now that the housing is loose, I don't have this totally out in the back here, I can actually lift this up and continue taking out this E-torx right here. Also, if you ended up binding up here, once you loosen that one up top, you just pull the housing back and you can actually work this way, work this bottom E-torx out. Now this is going to be the first one in when you're going back together, because you won't be able to tighten it if you do that last. And now that there's no tension on it, I can walk this out with my fingers. These gloves are a bit slippery with oil. I'm just using this to loosen that up. You can see it's actually a pretty long bolt here. There we go. And now I can sneak that out. And that's that one right there. And this is going to help save a lot of time. Now I did put a catch basin under the vehicle to catch any coolant that does dribble down. Now with that one off, I can go back through here and remove that inner one the rest of the way. Now it's good to have a magnet. Don't want to drop this and then have to hunt for it. And this is the back one. And that's going to free up that oil filter housing completely at this point. Now we can take a look at that. Alright, let's pull this back so you can see. With this loose, I can actually lift the entire oil filter housing up and out of the way. And that's going to enable you to take a good look right here. Here's a coolant passage, and then you have your oil passages. And this typically you'll have oil running down along this side and in front of the engine, or down on the side over here. So we need to clean this up and replace the gasket that is integrated into this housing. This is also your oil pressure switch right here, and you'll have a little internal valve in this oil filter housing. What's nice is that this housing doesn't usually fail, and you just have to replace just the gasket, which is inexpensive. I'm going to start by cleaning the area. Just want to wipe any kind of dirt and leftover debris from this location. So we have a good clean sealing surface. First I'm just going to wipe it with a rag. Now you don't want to use anything that's metal on this particular engine because it can cause pitting and corrosion. Due to that, BMW's come up with this cool eraser block, and basically it's like very, very fine sandpaper in a block format, and you just go ahead and use that to clean everything and take off any kind of dirt buildup. Any kind of buildup like this right here is what you're trying to remove. I've seen people use Scotch-Brite, just very fine, and just kind of wipe it down. You can use a little bit of brake clean on a rag, or you could pick up one of these erasers at a BMW dealership. I'm not sure the part number off the top of my head, but it does a pretty decent job taking off this corrosion that builds up. Bag in that, not to get anything in there. And you just use it like an eraser. I'm going to go ahead and clean this up. I do have some Scotch-Brite, which does a really good job as well, just to kind of go over everything really quick. So, I mean, you don't have to get that eraser. Scotch-Brite really almost works better. In cleaning that surface. And wipe it down. I'm going to spray a little brake clean on a rag. Just clean that sealing surface really well. Okay, that's the finished product, nice and clean. Now for the oil filter housing, which we have just moved up over to the side. Same idea, you're going to use a pick and work this gasket out. It doesn't come out in one piece because it's real brittle. You just have to work out each piece one at a time. Usually once you get it started, you can kind of peel it free. Just like that. Here's the old gasket. Next step would just be to wipe down the sealing surface of the housing itself. You can actually take a little bit of brake clean once again on the edge of a rag and run it through the channels. Take a small screwdriver with the rag, you can get into all the cracks a little bit better and wipe it out. Try to make sure to remove all of the gasket material. Usually not much sticks in here, so it's not too hard to clean out. Also using a small piece of this is an oil absorbent cloth pad. Works pretty well to get into the nooks and crannies and remove any residual oil. I don't like to just spray oil, or sorry, brake cleaner all throughout here because I have the oil filter still attached and that's maintaining all that oil in that cover right there. So that's nice and clean. Time to put the gasket on. Thought I'd show you the difference between the two gaskets. Now this one here, back off so you can see that better, is the old one and this is the new one. Hopefully you can see that. This here has been compressed for so long. It's a lot more body, a lot more width to the new gasket, and this is what causes the leak. Now you don't use any kind of RTV or anything like that. This is just a pressure fit seal. So just match it up over the holes and push the new gasket into place. Just like that, and you can feel the nice ridge that it has, and that's going to create that nice seal. Okay, now it's time to just mate the two together. And remember, you have the three. This is that very bottom in the front, was the smallest. This one's the top, and then this is that hidden one. I'm going to start with the bottom one. I'm just going to bring this around and place it in the location it's supposed to go. I'm going to catch that bottom one first. This one down here. Pass it through. Carefully just get it started. And then I need to work that one down first. Yep, it's caught. Because I'm not going to be able to get the tool in here to tighten up that bottom torx. So now, using my ratcheting E-torx, I can lift up the housing a bit and get that on there. To start working that down, if I can get the torx end to line up. I can probably go a little bit more with my hand first. Now I have it caught and lifted up, so now the tedious part is just slowly working this bottom E-torx into place. So I'm not going to have you watch me do that. I'm going to tighten it up so that it's almost tightened, not quite. There's a little bit of movement so I can put the other bolts in easier. I've tightened that down to a point where I can get this tool in here, that ratcheting E-torx, without worrying about this hose. And it still is slightly loose. You always want to double check, make sure your gasket hasn't moved. But at this point, you can put that top one in, which is right here. Now you want to leave it loose. It's going to help you locate everything. So I'm going to run this down by hand as far as I can go. Again, you don't want to tighten anything completely down yet because it helps you guide that other bolt in. If you tighten it down, it might not be fully matched up and you have a chance of cross-threading. Now for that back top one, it's nice to have a magnet so that you can hold on to that bolt without dropping it as you feed it through. And get that started here and tuck it in probably be better to put it about here. Slide that in. Once you get it into the bore, then you don't have to worry about that magnet and dropping the bolt. So there's that hidden one right there, and just using that magnet is what I did to help get that in there. And what's nice is that you can get your hand on the side of the intake manifold. So now I'm going to use that other setup coming through here to tighten that one down. Try to get a different shot so you can see this. There it is right there. So I'm going to come through the side of the intake here, and I can guide it. Guide that swivel head. So I can get that swivel E-torx in there and work that down. Okay, I'm going to just start to snug it a little bit and stop, and I'm going to tighten up this one up top here. Make sure no wiring is caught between the edges. I had a couple of techs do that, and see right there, you could actually pinch that if you weren't paying attention and cause some problems. Okay, I'm just going to snug that down. I'm going to do that bottom one. While I'm here, I think I'll snug this one down too. Since I have the camera in that position. Okay, and these are pretty snug. So tighten, give it a little, about a quarter turn, and stop. Tighten, snug, a little quarter turn. That's perfect. Now that bottom one. And snug that one down. You can see the housing pull together. Snug it down. And if you don't have the oil cooler version, that would really be it, besides topping off the coolant, because you only lost a little bit up here right towards the upper radiator hose. For this vehicle though, I do have to go ahead with installing the gasket on the front of this, the oil cooler. Now same thing on this surface, you need to wipe out the channel, which I've done already, to remove any bit of the old gasket and remove any kind of residual oil. I just used a screwdriver and a rag and a little bit of brake clean. Same thing on the oil cooler. Just close my light. Need to wipe down that surface as well. Put this in a position where you can see. Now if you have the version with the oil cooler, same thing. You want to wipe this surface down and use something to clean it. I'm going to use a little piece of Scotch-Brite again. It seems to do a better job than the magic eraser. You really only have to clean the sealing surface and remove that residual gasket. See, it does a pretty decent job cleaning that up. once you go over it with a little bit of Scotch-Brite, a little bit of brake clean again on a rag, wipe any residual oil off so you get a nice clean surface. Now it's time to install that gasket. And you really can't install this wrong, which is great. Again, it's a press fit. Just place the gasket right into the cutout. Place the cooler into its location and loosely install the E12 bolts. Remember, you have that bottom one. Let's see if I can use. I'm going to use this as a guide. Just put that into the E12 socket. Make sure the threads catch. Yep, nice. Go ahead and pre-tighten that bottom one up. Again, you leave it loose to help localize all three as you're installing it. Once you have all your hold downs in, you can go ahead and start tightening that up. There are a couple of cutouts on the back side where the oil filter housing has a couple of nubs that stick out, so you have to make sure that that lines up as well as you draw this in. And these should go in pretty easy by hand, so if they don't want to go in, then I would stop. Something's not right. Okay, now I'm up against the pressure of the gasket. Go ahead and snug these down. And it does not take much force for these to bottom out. Just snug them down tight, a little quarter turn. Snug. Quarter turn. Snug that down, little quarter turn. Okay. Don't forget to plug in your sensor in the back. That sensor right there. Oops. This one right here with the push tab. And I did take this off, so I have to put those bolts back in for my power steering reservoir. And that was these small torx bolts. That's a T45. Again, just get that started on both sides. 2 hold downs, so it makes it nice and easy. It's just one little thing to get in there a little bit more. You saw that's where I was ratcheting. So if you have this set up, not all of them have the power steering reservoir right here. You won't have to worry about that step. This repair is pretty similar across the board on N51, N52, N52K engines. Some things will just be slightly different, but the meat and potatoes of this repair is the same. Snap it down. Snap that down. Okay, it's a good idea I always like to just kind of touch each component and just kind of go over it. This is tight, 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 tight. I know I did those 3. This one's good. That bottom one I snugged down, that one in the back, my sensor. And that's really all the components for the system. So I've lost maybe a little bit of coolant. I would just have to top up a little bit. So I can go ahead and do that now. Now it's a good idea to top off your coolant. I'm going to go ahead and open up the cap here. And you have a plastic bleeder screw. So I'm going to crack that bleeder screw open. Check, make sure that O-ring is on there. Okay, now I'm going to add coolant. This is a BMW coolant with a 50-50 mix. Just going to fill that up until it overflows from the bleeder screw. And that's going to displace the air. There it is right there. Put your cap on. Now you can run it. At this point, I like to make sure to clean the belts off. Put that bleeder screw back in. And then once it's cool, double check your coolant level. And if you'd like, you can remove a little bit. This is just gently snug down so that you're at the correct level. So for now, I'm just going to cap that off, because you can do that on your own. Then at this point, you'd be installing the front covers. I'm going to leave this off because I still have to do the valve cover and eccentric shaft sensor and some spark plugs. So I'm going to have that piece that I'll show you after. But I'm going to go ahead and clean off the front of the engine now. But it's as simple as that, not too difficult to repair for this oil filter housing gasket. Definitely something if you have the right tools, and you should plan ahead. Which I went over all the tools, watch the video first. Hopefully you've done that, and then it's definitely something you could tackle yourself. And this is a very common leak. Let's take a look. I just did a quick cleaning with some engine degreaser, and nice and clean. The belts are nice and clean, and those pig mats do a really good job, or a lot of rags tucked in there to catch that oil. And then I don't like to leave any oil that did make it to the belts on the belt, so I cleaned it right away. And calling it a night for tonight. Basically that's the entire procedure for this oil filter housing. It's already started and run without any problems. Now, I did start it, shut it off, and I came out and just double checked, make sure that there was no leaks. Didn't expect there to be any, but it's always a good idea to do a quick double check on anything, any kind of work that you do.